Hi everybody, this is Faith from Creative Bug coming at you live like we do every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. And I'm about to show you a craft that I have done a ton of times, both in my personal life and my professional life. I actually worked for a year, hand dyeing fine hand paint yarns with Freya Fibers, which is an amazing yarn company, and their yarn is absolutely stunning. So I'm going to share with you some of the tips and tricks I learned there, how to make yarn in your own home. Now, the most important thing you'll need is the yarn, of course. It should be natural fibers, wool, silk, not cotton. Acid dyes will not work with cotton. And jacquard acid dyes, which are fairly inexpensive, I think they're like $2.50 a piece, and there's tons of colors. And the acid in this refers to, you need to either use vinegar or citric acid when you mix the actual dye, or the way I'm going to be doing it is in a pre-soak. I have a couple skeins of yarn soaking in half a cup of vinegar, and the rest of it is water. You'll need some gloves for handling the acid dyes, and also a respirator or a face mask. I won't be using one because then you can't hear me talk. But this is a good instance of do as I say, not as I do. It's harmful if inhaled. And your wool is going to be in skeins. Now, I wanted to show you how I can turn a ball of yarn into a skein of yarn using a yarn swift. It's one of my favorite tools, and it's big and bulky, and every time I move into a teenier apartment, it still comes with me because it's very handy. So you'll want to pop it up. And if you're trying to keep it a very specific width, like if you're measuring it out to, this is approximately 2 yards, but if you're being specific, you'll want to wrap some washi tape around it to make sure it stays consistent, and if it drops, you'll be able to tell. And here we are just tying the yarn around one of the intersections, and we're just going to spin it. Now, if you don't have a Swift, you can use a really nice roommate or a partner or a friend to hold their hands out, or a back of a chair. You can use a Niddy Noddy, which is another super fun tool, and when you wrap it around, you get to feel like a very expressive performer, because you have to do a lot of waving your arms around. But this is I've found the most simple version. So see the bottom pop down, and I want to screw it back in, or else this whole thing will collapse. And the reason why we want this in skein, which rhymes with rain, even though it looks like skein, I think it takes every new knitter a few years to feel fully comfortable pronouncing that word. The reason why we're doing it in a skein instead of a ball is it gives a lot more area around the fibers for the yarn to flow. We're intentionally going for a spotted look, but if you're doing a solid, the last thing you want is white spots. And I'm just going to finish up this ball. I already wound half of it. And then after we wind it all the way, we're going to separate it using some cotton yarn. Thank you for your patience. We're almost there. And I'm going to tie the end of the yarn to the very beginning of the yarn. And this helps to keep it uncluttered. As you can imagine, this is a very tangly process. I just tie the ends together as so. And this next part, I've pre-cut a couple of pieces of cotton yarn. You'll definitely want to use cotton and not the same yarn as the yarn you're dyeing, or else it'll felt together. You want about 8 inches, and we're going to wrap this in a figure 8. So just approximately separate with your fingers into 3 sections. And the bottom one goes under, over, under, and the top one goes over, under, over. And this will help after we've done the dyeing to pull it out and get it sorted. And I like to use a contrasting color. Also, if you're going to be dyeing a lot of these, you can cut them even longer, so at the very end, you'll just be snipping off the knots, and you can reuse the thread. And also, many thanks to Tina Whitmore, who is the brilliant dyer of Knitwits, who taught me all these inside tips and tricks. Okay, we're going to do one more approximately 1/3 of the way around. And then we'll put it in our soak. Some people are really uncomfortable with the scent of vinegar. If that is you, then I recommend going for citric acid. It sounds dramatic, but it's actually available in a lot of cosmetic stuff like bath bombs, which I definitely love a good bath bomb. A lot of that's citric acid, so it's not as harmful as you may assume. Now I'm going to soak this. Don't forget we are live, so if you have any questions about the process, the materials, if you've done this yourself, if you want to know, can I do this with Kool-Aid? Or can I use Wilton food dyes? You know what, I'm gonna let you ask those questions before I answer them. I'm making it easy for you, I'm giving you the questions. So in the meantime, I've had these soaking for 30 minutes at minimum, and I'm gonna pour it out. Let's see, our bucket over here. And then I'm pouring it into a salad spinner to get the rest of the water out. And you want it damp, but not too runny. So if we were going ahead with the skein we just wound, we would fill this up with water and vinegar and soak it. I'll probably do that after I say goodbye to you folks.
We have our first question. Abigail is asking, well, can I dye with Kool-Aid?
Yes, you can. And it's a really good way to do it with kids. It's super messy. And if you ever tried to like dye your hair with Kool-Aid as a teen, I was a medium rebellious teen. I went for orange, so it didn't show up at all in my hair. But it's pretty, if you do it with the vinegar, it is pretty stay fast. So you can actually use it for projects that you'll knit with later on. And I would say the grape is particularly vibrant, so go for the grape. And also the green produces some really interesting effects.
Can you use food dye?
Yes, you can use food dye. I prefer the acid dyes because they're the most vibrant and they're most saturated, and in terms of price, they actually last a very, very long time. So my first choice would be the Jacquard acid dyes. But if you're, hanging out at home and you're poking around the craft supplies to see what you have and you don't have acid dyes on hand, yeah, definitely go for the Wilton food coloring gel colors or Kool-Aid, and make sure you use vinegar. If you don't use vinegar, it'll just make a muddled mess and it'll bum you out.
Can you use tie-dye paints?
Yes you can. And a lot of tie-dye paints are made by the same brand. Our next important step is Courtney triple layered the paper here, but we're still going to need to protect our work surface. So this is just saran wrap, and I'm doing it the width of the table. Because our hank is about 2 meters or 2 yards long, I want it to be at least 1 yard and 6 inches on either side. So here is my hank. And I'm gonna squeeze it out just a little more so it's not dripping.
Okay, speaking of dripping, if you don't have a salad spinner, what else can you use to remove the excess water?
You can use a colander.
Do you recommend squeezing water out?
Yeah, you can use a colander, drain it out, squeeze it out. This part you don't have to be too methodical about, because honestly, it's even wilder after here, so you can plan it as meticulously as possible. Once we put the yarn dyes on, we're not in control anymore. I don't know who is, but it's not you or me.
All right, one more question.
Yes, please.
Vicky wants to know, are you using wool? What kind of...
I'm using 100% merino wool. That tends to work best. I've soaked some, it's nylon cotton blend. Cotton will not dye with acid dyes. Don't try it, it'll be very disappointing. You'll think you have like a really fabulous design, and then it'll just look like you spilled on yourself. So acid dyes are not for cotton. Use cotton-specific dyes for cotton, like most tie dyes are for cotton. So when I said before, can you use tie-dye dye? Yes, for wool, but it doesn't work the opposite way around. You cannot use the wool dyes for cotton. Also gloves, super important. Yesterday I casually used a spoon, and I didn't touch anything, I swear. And I met my boyfriend. Ugh, what happened to you? Because I had monster hands. So here is the exciting part. We are going to sprinkle on our dye. Make sure you have a paper towel to wipe off your spoon, or 3 spoons. And I had used 3, I'll show you soon, 3 shades, and it ended up with so many colors. It was incredibly vibrant. I'm gonna use the back. And then you just tap, tap very gently, a very small amount. And I would do it no closer than 6 inches apart. So this is the part where you should be wearing a mask. Do as I say, not as I do type situation. Any of these dust particles should not be flying into your mouth. Sorry, cameraman, for exposing you to danger as well. Well, that's a little over dramatic, Brian. We're gonna repeat it with the yellow. And this is gonna look amazing with the blue, I'm telling you.
Faith, let's take a moment to talk about our Joanne offer.
Oh, absolutely. So we have, if you have been enjoying us live, but you haven't dug deeper, it's kind of the difference between seeing like a favorite author read versus reading their books themselves. So go to creativebug.com and we have a 2-month free trial with promo code Joanne2. Also, you can get all of this material at Joanne. The jacquard dye is the 100% merino wool. I don't think the salad spinner, but as we said before, that's fairly arbitrary. We also have a bunch of knitting classes that you could use to go along with your hand-dyed yarns or crochet.
Ooh, what about your scarf class with the giant tassels?
I have, it might not be seasonally appropriate unless you're in
Southern Hemisphere.
the Southern Hemisphere, but I have a super scarf class, which would look amazing with some hand-dyed yarns. Oh, that'd be so luscious and vaguely eccentric. And if you don't even know what I'm talking about, please go to creativebug.com and check out Faith Hale's class. Okay, so as it stands right now, it looks a little bit overwhelming, or underwhelming. We don't have too many colors on there. This is where the magic happens. So you have to roll. Let's just check the other side to see if it's totally bereft of color. So it doesn't have a whole lot of dye on the other side. So I'm just gonna pat it. I'm gonna drag it through what we've already done. Yeah, so there's a little bit of disbursement, excuse me. So we fold up the bottom edge. We make it into a little burrito. And we're sealing it down. This is where the professional dyer in me comes in. You seal it down and roll it up. And now, your best bet is to put this in a steamer in a pot of water and then simmer it for 30 minutes. But we do not have 30 minutes because this is a live shoot. There was my seam. I'm gonna put that seam side down. You can already see how incredible it's turning. Now we're going to put it in the microwave for 1 minute. Oh, it's a haunted microwave.
That was 1 second.
Gonna do it for 59 more seconds. So for this, you can also use your oven. If you want it on one of the lower temperatures, like 220 degrees, and have a metal sheet pan, don't use that pan for other cooking. I use a paper plate as to not taint any other plates we have here in the studio. Was there
Yes.
questions?
Yes, they're coming. Sandra is asking if you can use light activated dyes for dyeing yarn.
I love that idea. I wish I had an answer for you, and I hope to find out an answer for you because it seems like an amazing experiment. I think the tricky part would be like Dynaflow. Is that what you're thinking of? Those
Lumi.
Lumi inks, yeah. Would you have to do it in the dark and then take it out into the sun? I don't know. Great question. If anyone else knows the answer to that, or if you've tried it yourself, please answer in our comments section. We're going to repeat, well, we should technically repeat this process a couple times, taking the yarn out, checking it, and putting it back in. And this is what checking it means. We want to make sure that the water in the yarn is clear. So when you push it down, you see that? We still have a lot of pigment in the yarn. So we're going to put it in for 1 more minute. And also, wrapping it tight keeps it from burning the yarn. And if you have a microwave oven that runs really high, definitely recommend the stovetop version for you. Otherwise, you'll just burn up. This is the yarn I had mentioned previously that is half nylon. It's nylon, cotton, and spandex. So the nylon will dye. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, we know we have to do it pink now. But the cotton will not. So that'll produce some interesting effects. And nylon, surprisingly, is one man-made fiber that dyes like an animal fiber. I don't know why. If you're just joining us, we're waiting for microwave to heat up the yarn.
Elizabeth Hummel just joined and says, Alabama says, hey y'all.
Hello.
Hey y'all.
Good to hear from you. Our next step is to rinse out the yarn. Now you need to make sure that the yarn is the same temperature as the water. This is very essential. If there's a difference in temperature, the yarn's gonna freak out. It's very moody, especially after it's been stuck in the microwave. So if you use cold water on the hot yarn, it'll felt it, or you can let it cool and use cool water. But if you let it cool, please don't use hot water. So it's definitely gonna be super duper hot. And like I was showing you earlier with, see it's running, well I don't know if you can see that. I can tell because I was a professional. But you can see there's a little less ink in it, and we're gonna rinse it out, and some ink will, or some dye will rinse out, but not most of it. And so see this steaming yarn sack. So let's put it back on here so we can see how magnificent that is. So we had 3 colors, and now we have this full rainbow. I don't know if this is like unicorn hair. Is this pride yarn? Is this, I think Leanna had said yesterday, like a mermaid's tail. So from 3 colors, you get this crazy spectrum. And also, we're keeping the white in there. So I have this warm water. I'm gonna rinse it out. And you're not going to be able to see the full glory. So you can see that some dye is releasing. That's mainly the blues. Blues take a lot more time to absorb into the yarn than other shades. So we're gonna rinse this out. And then after the water runs clear, once you've rinsed it a few times, which we will do once we have access to a sink, then your yarn will be ready to dry. Also, some people like to rinse their yarn using a squirt of shampoo or conditioner to give it a pleasing scent. Here's that little nugget. And I'm gonna show you what I made yesterday. So when you buy the yarn, yes, you can buy the patents, but I would even more recommend this yarn called Heavenly. I've never knit with it before, and I'm definitely gonna knit with it 100 billion more times because it's so beautiful. 100% merino, and it's super wash, which means that you can put it in the washing machine. It's perfect for babies, thank goodness, because I'm always making useless cashmere things for babies, and they hate it. Shrink proof. So this is the skein I made yesterday using the exact same mechanism. You can see it's like they're cousins. I love those bright fuchsias. Isn't that bonkers? It's so good. And then here is a little swatch I stitched up. It's so pretty. So it's a lot more subtle than it looks. It looks like this wild and crazy skein, but it's super subtle, and I think textural stitches, this is a seed stitch, work really well with this. And if you decide to make yarn on your own, please feel free to post it to the Creative Bug Galleries. My favorite thing in the whole world is seeing what you guys come up with based on what we do here in the studio. We really appreciate your support.
We got more questions.
And we have more questions.
Okay.
Good timing.
Bree is wondering, if you were to dye all of the yarn,
Yeah.
would the process differ?
You'd need a bigger table, and you'd need to ensure. Oh, I think I stepped on my microphone. I can-
Yeah. Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties.
Wait, we're gonna put it.
We-
you
at
gotta,
least we figured
you
out
gotta
the
go up
microwave.
this way.
A first for Creative Bug.
Okay.
PG-13.
Okay. I think we're good. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Brian. My lifesaver. This is what happens when I try to say goodbye before you're ready. The question is if you want to make more. You want to make sure that the skeins are exactly the same length and width. That's going to affect it substantially, especially when it comes to knitting. And then you will want to line them out on a table. It's probably best to do at most 3 at a time because your cling wrap is as wide as it is and your arms are as long as they are. So I would say, yeah, maybe 3 skeins, or I suppose you could do 2 at a time, but you would want to overlap your cling wrap, and then that would give you the same dye lot. Also, you'll have better results if you pre-mix a liquid dye, so you'd add this in a certain measured amount to water. The speckles are a lot less likely to give you consistent results.
Okay, last question. Sarah wants to know, I've never dyed before, she says, and she wants to know if you're getting started dyeing fabric, yarn, how do you get started?
I would get started with probably the same order I made from Joanne 2 weeks ago. 3 of these, because 3 dyes comes up with a ton of amazing colors. A couple skeins of a 100% merino yarn, or if you have yarn lying around, just make sure it's natural, and then just go to town. And also, less is more, of course, as you saw, we made a scant few sprinkles, and then we covered almost this entire skein. So start gently, but also give yourself really nice materials to work with. I know it's always tempting to use scrap yarn when you're embarking upon a new project, but I have to say this yarn is so squishy and lovely to work with that even if it was ugly, I probably would have enjoyed the process of making it just the same because it's very luxurious. But you can still put it in the washing machine. Thank you, everybody who asked questions. We always appreciate your participation. And thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you on Thursday.